By the summer of 1944, the Allies had already made history with the landings at Normandy, a dramatic opening of the Western Front that captured the world's attention. Yet, high above the sun-baked hills of southern France, a parallel plan was quietly taking shape, one that history would almost forget. Operation Dragoon, the planned invasion of the French Riviera, was designed to strike the enemy where they least expected it, to open new ports for the Allies, and to liberate a region that had long suffered under occupation. The idea seemed deceptively simple: land thousands of troops along a 60-mile stretch of coastline, break through German defenses, and push inland. But behind the simplicity lay months of complex planning, heated debates, and risks that could have derailed the entire operation. Winston Churchill initially resisted the idea, fearing that dividing the Allies' strength might jeopardize the ongoing efforts in Normandy. He worried about spreading resources too thin and questioned whether the southern invasion would offer enough strategic advantage. Franklin D. Roosevelt, however, saw it differently. He envisioned a rapid advance that would liberate France faster, relieve pressure on Normandy, and secure crucial supply lines through the ports of Marseille and Toulon. The disagreement was not merely political. Military planners had to consider every variable: the strength of German forces, the treacherous terrain of Provence, the weather, and the possibility of logistical disaster. Reconnaissance missions mapped the coastline with painstaking detail, noting hidden cliffs, fortified bunkers, and potential landing beaches. Aerial photographs were analyzed, sometimes revealing subtle signs of enemy defenses that could decide life or death for thousands of men. Intelligence reports painted a picture of a German army weakened by constant retreat, but still capable of fierce resistance. At the same time, the Allies faced the monumental task of assembling a force unlike any before. Over 150,000 troops from the United States, Britain, and Free France would be involved, along with colonial soldiers from Africa who brought their own experience and courage to the fight. Every unit had to be trained for amphibious assaults, cliff scaling, and nighttime paratrooper drops. Commanders rehearsed landings on mock beaches in southern England, simulating enemy fire, obstacles, and the chaos that would inevitably follow. Despite the extensive preparation, uncertainty hung over every decision. Could the paratroopers land accurately in dense fog? Would the commandos reach the cliff defenses without alerting the enemy? How would supply ships navigate mine-infested waters to deliver essential ammunition and food? The stakes were enormous, and a single misstep could turn a bold strategy into a catastrophic failure. Yet, as the summer sun rose over the English Channel, confidence in meticulous planning, intelligence gathering, and the bravery of the troops began to outweigh the fears. Maps were studied repeatedly, plans refined, and contingencies drawn up for every conceivable scenario. Officers whispered about the audacity of the operation, about how it could change the course of the war in Europe, and yet how easily it could vanish into disaster if even one element failed. By mid-August, the beaches of southern France would no longer be quiet. They would become the stage for one of the most decisive yet overlooked operations of the Second World War. The world would focus on Normandy, but those involved in Operation Dragoon knew that what they were about to attempt could reshape the southern front, liberate hundreds of towns and villages, and create supply lines that would fuel the Allied push toward Germany. This chapter of planning, debate, and preparation was invisible to most of the world, but it was here that the seeds of success were sown. The courage of the soldiers, the vision of the generals, and the daring of those who studied maps and skies would soon collide in a way that would change the history of southern France forever. It was a gamble on precision, bravery, and timing, a gamble that demanded everything from men who had already witnessed the horrors of war. And yet the stage was set, the troops ready, and the world, unaware, would soon see history unfold along the forgotten shores of Provence.
The morning of August 15, 1944, dawned over the French Riviera with a quiet tension that masked the storm about to break. Over 150,000 Allied soldiers, sailors, and airmen were poised to strike the beaches of southern France, a force unlike any the region had ever seen. The Germans, though retreating in the face of the Allied advance, had fortified the coastline with bunkers, minefields, and artillery positions, confident that the natural cliffs and rocky beaches would give them an advantage. Yet the Allies had a plan that relied not just on brute force, but on precision, surprise, and courage. Landing craft filled with American and French troops raced toward the beaches, their hulls rocking against the waves, guns at the ready. Paratroopers had been dropped hours earlier into fog-shrouded valleys inland, tasked with securing key bridges and cutting enemy lines of communication. Many landed far from their intended drop zones, their descent shadowed by mist, trees, and the uncertainty of enemy fire. Some troops found themselves in enemy-held villages, forced to improvise, to fight, and to survive with only their training and instinct to guide them. Along the cliffs, French commandos prepared to scale sheer rock faces under the cover of darkness. Using ropes, grapnels, and sheer determination, they climbed silently toward German positions, eliminating sentries and opening paths for advancing infantry. Their movements were a mixture of stealth, skill, and raw bravery, each man aware that a single mistake could mean death. On the beaches, chaos reigned. Artillery shells exploded in the sand, sending plumes of smoke into the sky, while machine gun fire cut through the roar of the surf. Medics moved frantically, treating the wounded and dragging them to safety as soldiers pressed forward despite the carnage. Amid the chaos, moments of heroism shone through. Units that had trained together for months suddenly had to improvise, coordinating under fire with hand signals and shouted orders. Leadership mattered, and officers who remained calm and decisive often turned near disasters into victories. Supply craft followed behind, offloading weapons, ammunition, and vital equipment while under constant threat from German coastal defenses. The coordination between land, air, and naval forces was critical. Fighter planes strafed enemy positions, bombers pounded bunkers, and warships shelled the coastline, softening defenses and creating openings for the infantry. Yet even with this overwhelming support, every yard gained on the beach came at a cost. Soldiers fought not only against the enemy, but against the fear, fatigue, and confusion that accompanied amphibious warfare. Inland, the paratroopers faced similar challenges. In fog-filled valleys and wooded hills, small groups engaged German patrols, destroyed artillery pieces, and secured bridges that would prove essential for the rapid inland advance. Communication lines were strained, and units often found themselves isolated, relying on their initiative and courage to accomplish their missions. By midday, the tide of battle had begun to turn. German resistance, though determined, started to falter under the sheer pressure of coordinated assaults. The beaches were being secured, the cliffs taken, and inland positions slowly captured. Every town liberated, every bunker neutralized, brought the Allies closer to their goal, opening the ports of southern France and breaking the enemy's grip on the region. Yet even as the sun rose high in the sky, the operation was far from over. Soldiers pressed forward, aware that a single counterattack could reverse the hard-won gains of the morning. Every movement was critical, every decision a matter of life and death. By nightfall, the first day of Operation Dragoon had ended, but its success was clear. The Allies had achieved surprise, landed their forces under difficult conditions, and begun a push inland that would eventually liberate southern France in just 30 days. The bravery, skill, and determination of those involved set the tone for the rest of the campaign. While the world celebrated Normandy, the soldiers on these forgotten beaches had written their own story of courage, precision, and daring, a story that would shape the course of the war in ways few would ever fully remember.
After the initial landings, the fight moved swiftly inland, transforming the sunlit hills and valleys of southern France into a battlefield of strategy, courage, and fierce resistance. The Germans, though weakened by months of retreat, were far from defeated. They had fortified towns, set ambushes along narrow roads, and dug in along river lines, determined to slow the Allied advance. The Allies, however, had momentum on their side, and every hour counted. In the town of Toulon, one of the operation's primary objectives, American and Free French forces pushed through streets barricaded with debris and defended by determined German soldiers. Tanks rolled forward, infantry moved in coordination, and artillery fire shattered enemy positions. It was a brutal fight, house by house, street by street, but the determination of the liberating forces never wavered. Further north, the paratroopers faced equally daunting challenges. Many had landed miles from their intended zones and found themselves cut off in dense forests or fog-covered valleys. Small units engaged in hit-and-run attacks, sabotaging rail lines, capturing enemy officers, and holding bridges against counterattacks. These actions, though often small in scale, had an enormous impact on the flow of the battle. The Battle of Montélimar became a defining moment of the campaign. German forces attempted to retreat northward while holding a line along the Rhône Valley. Allied troops, using a combination of rapid mechanized advances and encirclement tactics, trapped large formations of the enemy. Tanks, jeeps, and infantry moved in perfect coordination, cutting off escape routes and capturing thousands of prisoners. By the end of the battle, over 10,000 Germans had been taken prisoner, marking one of the largest surrenders of the Southern campaign. Amid the chaos of battle, acts of individual heroism shone brightly. Audie Murphy, one of the most decorated American soldiers of the war, displayed extraordinary courage, taking out enemy positions despite being vastly outnumbered. Wilburn Ross, Charles Coolidge, and countless others risked everything to hold critical positions, rescue wounded comrades, and push the advance forward. Their bravery inspired entire units, proving that courage and leadership could turn the tide in even the most desperate moments. The campaign also highlighted the contributions of African colonial soldiers fighting under the French flag. These men, many of whom had never seen France before, faced harsh conditions, fierce enemy fire, and the unfamiliar terrain of Provence. Their determination and skill played a crucial role in the liberation of towns and villages, ensuring that the southern offensive moved as planned. Logistics remained a constant challenge. Supplies had to move quickly to keep advancing troops equipped, while medical teams worked tirelessly to treat the wounded. Every captured town and bridge not only brought strategic advantage, but also a vital route for reinforcements and supplies. Yet the fighting was not only a series of planned maneuvers, it was also a battle of improvisation. Commanders and soldiers alike had to adapt to unexpected resistance, sudden counterattacks, and the unpredictable nature of terrain and weather. Decisions in the heat of combat could mean life or death, and the soldiers' training and intuition were put to the ultimate test. By late August, the southern region of France was steadily falling into Allied hands. Town after town was liberated, German forces were retreating or surrendering, and the ports of Marseille and Toulon were within reach. The operation demonstrated not just military skill, but the power of coordination, courage, and relentless determination. For those who fought in these battles, the success of Operation Dragoon was a testament to careful planning, adaptability, and the unbreakable spirit of the troops. Despite being overshadowed by Normandy in the public memory, the victories of these weeks would prove decisive in ensuring the rapid advance of the Allies toward Germany. The courage displayed on the streets,
cliffs, and valleys of southern France was a reminder that history is not only made in famous battles, but in the countless acts of bravery that together shape the outcome of a war.
As the Allies pushed inland, capturing towns and villages, the importance of logistics became impossible to ignore. The success of Operation Dragoon depended not only on bravery in battle, but on the ability to move men, weapons, and supplies quickly and efficiently. The ports of Marseille and Toulon became the lifeblood of the Southern Front. For months, these harbors had been under German control, heavily mined and fortified with artillery batteries that had to be neutralized before ships could dock safely. Engineers worked around the clock, clearing mines, repairing docks, and making the ports operational under the constant threat of counterattack. Once open, they provided a direct route for 1/3 of all Allied supplies entering France, a staggering amount that fueled the push toward Germany. Trucks, tanks, and infantry could now move freely, supported by fuel, ammunition, and food delivered from these newly secured ports. Naval convoys coordinated with ground forces, ensuring that reinforcements and equipment arrived exactly where they were needed. Airplanes patrolled the skies to protect supply lines from German raids, while anti-aircraft units on the ground defended the docks. This orchestration of sea, land, and air resources showcased the Allies' ability to integrate complex logistics into a rapid military advance. Securing these supply lines also had a psychological effect. German troops, already retreating from northern France, now faced an enemy capable of sustaining an unstoppable push southward. Morale among the Allied forces soared, knowing that reinforcements and vital supplies would always be just over the horizon. Meanwhile, captured towns and bridges became hubs for further operations. Rail lines were repaired, roads cleared, and depots established to store and distribute the influx of materiel. Every kilometer gained inland was supported by a well-oiled logistical machine, turning what could have been a short-term tactical victory into a sustained strategic advantage. The rapid liberation of southern France allowed the Allies to bypass heavily defended German positions and approach the Rhone Valley with overwhelming force. By combining momentum from the beaches with the secured ports, the Allies created a corridor that accelerated the advance northward, linking up eventually with forces moving out of Normandy. This integration of logistics and combat effectiveness demonstrated why General Eisenhower later called Operation Dragoon one of the most decisive advantages of the war. Without the ports and the meticulously planned supply chains, the rapid liberation of southern France would have been impossible, and the broader Allied campaign in Western Europe might have faced severe delays. What many overlook is that while soldiers fought bravely on the front lines, countless engineers, truck drivers, dock workers, and planners worked tirelessly behind the scenes, ensuring that every division had the fuel, ammunition, and support it needed to keep moving. Their contributions, though less glamorous, were just as vital to the success of the operation. By the end of August, Marseille and Toulon were fully operational, and southern France was effectively free. The Allies now had a strong foothold, a supply network capable of sustaining large-scale operations, and a clear path toward the heart of Germany. The victory was not just in battles fought with guns and tanks, but in the careful orchestration of resources, the foresight of planners, and the relentless drive to maintain momentum. Operation Dragoon had proven that military genius is measured not only in courage on the battlefield, but in the mastery of logistics, coordination, and timing that turns strategy into victory. By the time the last German units surrendered in southern France, Operation Dragoon had achieved what few believed possible. In just 30 days, one of the most successful amphibious operations of the Second World War had liberated hundreds of towns, captured over 130,000 prisoners, and secured vital supply lines that would sustain the Allies' push into Germany.
Yet, despite its staggering success, the operation was largely overshadowed in the public consciousness by the Normandy landings. Newspapers, radio broadcasts, and even history books focused on the beaches of northern France, while the heroic deeds in Provence went quietly unrecognized. This was not due to a lack of significance. The strategic impact of Dragoon was enormous. By opening the ports of Marseille and Toulon, the Allies gained access to 1/3 of all supplies entering France, a logistical advantage that sped up the liberation of the entire country. Troops could advance rapidly without worrying about running low on fuel, ammunition, or reinforcements. The rapid advance also forced German forces into a panicked retreat, disrupting their defensive plans and allowing the Allies to link up with forces moving out of Normandy, creating a continuous front across France. Beyond strategy and logistics, the human stories of courage and sacrifice were extraordinary. Paratroopers who had jumped into fog-covered valleys, commandos who had scaled cliffs under the cover of darkness, and colonial soldiers fighting on a foreign soil all displayed an extraordinary combination of skill and bravery. Medal of Honor recipients like Audie Murphy, Wilburn Ross, and Charles Coolidge, whose heroism became legendary, were only a few among thousands whose names would fade from public memory despite their pivotal roles. Yet the operation also left a lasting impression on military strategy. It demonstrated the effectiveness of coordinated amphibious and airborne assaults, the value of surprise and intelligence, and the power of integrating logistics with frontline operations. Eisenhower himself later praised Dragoon as a decisive advantage, recognizing that its success had accelerated the Allied advance and contributed directly to the eventual defeat of Nazi Germany. Historians have noted that the operation's forgotten status is partly due to timing. Coming just months after Normandy, it lacked the dramatic shock of a massive first invasion campaign and was largely overshadowed in the media. Moreover, political considerations and post-war narratives often emphasized other theaters of the war, leaving the Southern campaign underrepresented in textbooks and documentaries. Yet, for those who study it closely, Operation Dragoon stands out as a masterclass in planning, coordination, and execution. It reminds us that history is shaped not only by the battles we remember, but by the ones that quietly change the course of events, often without fanfare. Today, the liberated towns of southern France still bear the memory of that summer, with monuments, plaques, and local stories honoring the soldiers who fought to free them. Veterans' accounts, diaries, and photographs provide a window into the intensity of the fighting and the resilience of those involved. These personal stories reveal moments of bravery, fear, and triumph that statistics alone cannot convey. In reflecting on Dragoon, it becomes clear that its legacy is not measured solely by maps and supply lines, but by the lives it touched, the courage it inspired, and the lessons it left for future generations. It is a reminder that even in a war filled with monumental events, some of the most decisive victories can fade from memory, not because they were unimportant, but because the world's attention is often drawn elsewhere. Operation Dragoon remains a testament to the bravery of the soldiers, the foresight of the generals, and the extraordinary effectiveness of a campaign executed with precision, daring, and vision. Though history may have forgotten it in part, its impact on the liberation of France, the defeat of Germany, and the course of World War II is undeniable. And for those who take the time to uncover its story, it stands as one of the war's greatest triumphs, a victory that deserves to be remembered, studied, and honored for generations to come.